In this interview, I meet up with Ashley Avinashi. Ashley is a certified conscious parenting coach, international best-selling author, and founder of Raising Humanity. Raising Humanity is a transformational development platform that helps people recreate their foundation of beliefs based on their own values so that they can walk their most authentic path and support future generation in living theirs. Let's welcome Ashley. Thank you so much for coming in today and doing this interview with me, Ashley. I'm
It's
so
my
happy to
pleasure.
have you. Thank you. So I want to start off by asking you, you have an organization called Raising Humanity. I wanted to ask you, why did you create this?
Yeah, that's a big question because I think for a lot of us, the work that we come into, the deeper purpose that we feel into, typically comes from our own life experiences. So this definitely happened from my own experience where I was plugging away, trajectory of success prior to having children, busy, 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 feeling like in some ways I was on autopilot. I was going through my day, just waking up, checking off the boxes and getting life done. And it felt good. It felt on purpose then. But what I recognized when the kids came, and I was still continuing to work a lot because I had businesses of my own then, was that I was failing miserably, not only for myself, but the children. And I could see this immediately because the children were very reactive. The children wouldn't sleep through the night. The children had all sorts of other things going on. And I knew that something was happening there that I may possibly be playing a part in. Now, it
Mhm.
was difficult then for me to not chalk it up to just, oh, this might be sleep regression. Oh, it may just be an eating problem. Oh, their bladder might just be small, and that's why they're continuing to do what they're doing. There were a number of things that were coming up at that time where I didn't quite understand why the problems seemed to be so persistent problems, that we declare our children as having. Yet inside me, I felt this deep unwavering anxiety, this
Mhm.
heaviness, this inability to show up and really be present with my children. And what I
Mhm.
started to notice was these patterns within myself where I was constantly running away from them. I was
Mhm.
either, again, getting really busy, working around the house, doing more, cleaning up the dishes. But at every moment, despite knowing that my heart desired that authentic connection, I was finding myself running away. I didn't want
Mhm.
to face their big emotions. There was a lot that I knew within me, even if I couldn't name it, that I was running away from in that time. I knew that I wasn't doing justice to that relationship. So over time, we had a second, and with my second, he was born with club feet. So
Mhm.
what happened then was we landed ourselves in the hospital each Friday. We were
Mhm.
going back Friday after Friday, and he was going through quite a bit of treatment to move his feet back in a position where he
Mhm.
could eventually walk. But this went on for years. And
Mhm.
this was probably the beginning of my understanding that there's something more here that I wasn't quite tuning into with my first. And my
Mhm.
first is an empath, so he really felt everything. And as a result, he responded to it. What he would do is he would tend to shut down. But with my second, he's a lot more gregarious and vocal, and he would outrightly, scream out in the middle of the night. And this just happened night after night, 6 wake
Mhm.
ups, 8 wake ups, 12 wake ups. And I thought, these children are feeling very unsettled. And I'm prepared to get to the bottom of this because I too am getting unsettled,
Mhm.
feeling that. So over time, as I started to secretly, because I was ashamed of all that I was moving through and what these children were facing, not being able to maintain sort of this perfect life that I thought I was walking into with my children, I recognized that I wasn't the only parent going through these challenges, especially in the modern day world of parenting. I recognized that there were so many other parents also struggling, and they were finding it hard to bring voice to it. What was actually happening was I included was normalizing it. Well,
Mhm.
it's the child, it's the work outside, it's the busyness, it's this. And I just found myself singing the same narrative of I'm busy, I'm busy, I'm busy,
Yeah.
you know. But as I dove from there into more emotional process, I started to go deeper within myself. I started to understand a lot of the intergenerational patterning that was brought down through our lineage. by no
Mm-hmm.
fault of my parents, it's just the process of evolution, I started to recognize that exactly what my parents had handed down to me was what I was starting to transmit to my children. And that's really when I started to hit a turning point, and I said, no more. If I'm the one that's going to be the one who steps in and defies all that we've been living with, right? Anger cycles, cycles of control, cycles of perfectionism, cycles of needing to work hard to prove our worth. All of these patterns were running so deep, and I knew that if I wanted to free my children from that, that I would have to find a solution within myself. So that was really what started my journey. And as I started to understand how much my work was impacting not only my children, but my parents and everyone in my lineage to some extent, I started to realize that we could actually bring this work out into the world. And because I had sort of traveled what I felt far and wide to find the teachers that were really right for me, I started to recognize that there were so many that were willing to step into the space. So we created a very collaborative model because I feel like that's the wave of the future, is having a space that is very time effective for parents to come into, for them to do their process that can be really accessed from the home space, because not everybody would choose to do what I did, which was leave my children behind to go and explore what I was hungry for. So now what we've done is really brought this into a one-stop shop,
Nice.
one space where parents can come in and really get a good taste of the work and dive as deeply as they're ready to do. But we're really finding, particularly at this moment in time, that it's so critical for those parents who do have that calling in their hearts to say, I think there's more here.
Yeah.
I think I'm actually not living in true resonance with my values.
Yeah.
And as a result, I'm not giving my children the safety and the freedom to be in their true version of self, that they do require the spaces to freely express themselves and show up and also be guided
Yeah.
and reflected back as to what's possible for them in
Yeah.
this very lifetime.
Yeah, very, very cool. Like I admire that project. And I was going to say that we're all at this point, right? We were all going at a pace that we didn't like, right? Before
Mm,
COVID, right? I mean, I feel like everyone is kind of having this time to reflect,
mm.
right?
Yes,
Everybody.
very
The
much
the
so.
slowing down made us all think about what are we doing a little bit
Mm,
more, right? Yeah. But so you're very passionate about this work, right? Because
mm.
it's personally hit you hard before you discovered how to handle it.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I recognized as well, I mean, not to say that, sometimes we come into the savior complex when we've realized something for ourselves and we want to
Mm.
go out and save the world. And I think initially what I saw was so many parents struggling as well as their children struggling.
Yeah.
And that's what actually helped grow my passion, because as we started to help other parents, we recognized how far and wide this work was traveling. It
Yeah.
wasn't only impacting their children, as I said, it was impacting their parents, their aunts and uncles, the children's friends at school, and as a result, going up that lineage as well to that
Yeah.
child's friends' parents and breaking their spell of worry because there was now more connectivity, joy,
Yeah.
freedom, purpose within that child's life. So, as Dr. David Hawkins mentions, um, one conscious individual can impact 250,000 lives, and
Mm.
that's tremendous. And I'm not saying that we're seeking a very idealistic way of being in this lifetime, but it's really that connection with who we truly are that I find really alleviates so much of the suffering that we
Mm.
experience as humans. For us here at Raising Humanity, we find that, you know, the core of the suffering, the struggle that we feel as parents or otherwise, is really based on this misalignment
Mm.
with our inner landscape, with our inner GPS, our inner compass. And when we shut that down, that part of ourselves down, it can be very, very difficult to connect authentically to those around us, including our children. Yet,
Mm.
that's the one thing the children are here to show us, is that it's safe to be ourselves. And seeing what potential children have to be teachers, if we're not shutting that experience down, there's so much opportunity for us to heal
Mm.
as parents if we really truly stop and observe, first pausing, first
Mm.
part of that picture that you had mentioned, first pausing to understand, why is this going on in the way that it's unfolding for me?
Yeah. Yeah, that's we have to thank 2020 for that,
Right,
because we
right,
were all on this conveyor belt lifestyle, right? Like
right.
speed.
Yeah.
Yeah, for
Yeah, it's
sure.
always easier in hindsight because so often, I mean, we even work a fair bit with prenatal, right?
Mm,
The prenatal mamas who are saying, "Hey, I really want to come into this work and I want to prevent any upset that I can possibly put on my children." But
mm,
the truth is, you've experienced as well, until sometimes we hit that pain threshold and we realize that we're in the struggle, sometimes we're not hungry enough to really understand
no.
what's underneath it. Because we do have this preconceived notion, again, especially in this developed world where we have tools, we have community, where we have resources, and we believe that we can control it all. But when we
Mm,
have that child, we really recognize that there are things that will be out of our control, and
mm,
our only work is really to dive into our own emotional landscape and find our own regulation and balance within that.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. And you a couple of times mentioned hunger, which is, what do you mean by we are all driven by emotional hunger? What does that mean?
Yeah, so in the first 6 or 7 years of our lives, as Dr. Bruce Lipton and a few others talk about, this is when our subconscious is wide open. So this is when we're picking up the patterns and the ideologies of everyone around us and everything around us, society,
Mm-hmm.
culture, our family, and their familial patterns. So at this time is when we start to understand who we need to be for others to be loved and approved of. Because in years, our survival is also dependent on others. That we know for sure.
Mm-hmm.
If we don't do what is in compliance to those around us and fit in and belong, that we may not be picked up when we cry. We may not get the food. We may be emotionally manipulated, for example. And that's really hard on the ears and hearts for a lot of parents because I know that they're doing their best. I know here, especially, we live in these individual family units where we don't have the concept of villages like we once did, or they do have in other collectivist places. So, what happens during this time is we understand that our love and approval is dependent on others. What we don't understand as we transition into teenagehood, where we try and fight back and say, nope, I'm not going to depend on you for love and approval. I'm going to be my own authentic self. If that doesn't go so well, for the rest of our lives, we're typically looking around for somebody else to fulfill this unmet need of ours, this unmet emotional need where we were wanting to be seen, wanting to be heard, wanting to be loved as we were, wanting to be supported there. But it didn't necessarily happen as a result of the unconscious imprint that those around us were carrying.
Mm-hmm.
Again, by fault of their own, it's just where they were at in the evolutionary cycle of humanity. And with every generation we progress, so right now what we're seeing is that less and less we're driven by this emotional hunger. Yes, in individualistic cultures, we've taken this so far, through the Me Too movement and everything else, because this fire has been brewing inside of us, this
Mm-hmm.
unexpressed emotion that needed to come up. It's been broiling in this pressure cooker, and the
Mm-hmm.
lids sort of come off. And I think now we're starting to come into more harmonious balance, even though it may not seem that way. There's more
Mm-hmm.
grace coming into that. There's more of the union between the masculine and feminine within us. And with this, as we become wholes, our whole selves within, we're less and less looking outside of us to have that void filled by
Mm-hmm.
someone or something else, whether it's the food, whether it's the alcohol, whether it's the sex, whether it's um, a partner acting as our father, whether it's a sister acting as our mother. Typically those unmet needs from our childhood we put onto one another. And as a result, we come into very toxic relationships where we don't understand why. We
Yeah.
may be playing in a subservient role, or we may be playing as the dominant person within that relationship. And
Mm-hmm.
it's really all just a reflection of those unmet needs or that emotional hunger from our childhood being carried forward.
Mm-hmm. And then one of your primary mission probably is to stop that happening to kids, right? We're in the
Yes.
position when you're a parent, right?
Exactly, or closing the gap. Like I said, we can't avoid all of the emotional hunger. We can't avoid all of the pain, because children too, for those who believe, have their own karmic path and own karmic cycles. So it's not for us to completely obliterate all of their upsets and pain. They also have a life path that they're meant to learn from. That's just
Mhm.
part of the human journey when we're incarnated. But if we can hold them in safe space and simply witness and observe them where they are, based on our own willingness to do our own emotional cleansing, then it becomes more safe for that
Mhm.
child to come back to us, to come back to the home that they've always wanted,
Yeah.
which is, when we talk about this circle of safety, it's Dr. Gordon Neufeld and a few others that talk about this,
Mhm.
but really allowing that child to come back and say, look, I've really messed up. I have
Yes.
something going on here that I can't deal with. Can you be the ear for me? Can you be the shoulder? And when
Mhm.
we can do that without projection, holding space, yes, and lovingly giving them guidance without putting on them what we think is right for their soul's path, that I find the magic middle point.
Mhm. Exactly. Yeah. Very, very important. So, how important is for parents to reclaim their joy, freedom in their parenting? Like,
Mm. Yeah, for anyone listening, I ask you, how important is it for you to see joy, freedom, and purpose in the child that you're raising?
mm,
Because for many of us parents, me included for many years, I wasn't motivated enough to do the work for myself. But
mm,
when we see the child outside of us struggling and suffering, lights dim, eyes dim, posture sort of closed up, child's defiant, rebelling, pushing away from us, disconnected, addicted to video games, cell phones, TV, whatever it may be. That's what I ask, is how important is it for you to really allow this child to meet a fuller version of themselves?
mhm,
Because we all know that when that child came out of the womb, that's who they were. They were so much on purpose. They were willing to ask for what they needed. They're willing to express themselves. And yes, we live in a societal framework. Yes, we have to be reasonably civilized. I'm not saying act like a child, but as we navigate through the world with childlike wonder, we know how much more fulfilling this life is. We
mm,
know how much more creative we are when we're tapped into that intuition that we were born with. We know how much more carefree we are when we don't take on others' opinions about us and we just
mm,
let them be. So, with this and observing your child, what we've come to understand is that parents are really the first model for their child. If the parent can model safety in owning their own freedom, their own joy, their own aliveness, their own purpose, their own expression of their authentic self, it is that much more possible for the child to step into that, because what they learn from witnessing their parent, not being told, but by witnessing their parent, is that, hey, that could be a possibility for me.
yeah.
And we know, again, going back to those first 6 or 7 years, that this is the time that the child takes in everything that they believe about the world, what they
Mm,
believe to be true about themselves and those around them.
mm,
So it's absolutely essential for the parent to do their own work, because that is the greatest portal that the child will have to understanding that living that way is a possibility.
yeah. So what happens if like let's say I have kids that are older, right?
Mm,
And let's say I have some done some damage with
mm,
my previous knowledge, right?
mm.
And
As
now
we
that
all do. Yeah.
I'm yeah, right, it's a
Yeah.
knowledge that you previously had, and then you get woken, right? You're now a different kind of changing person. How do you like live with that? It's a form of guilt, right?
Yeah. So this is the beautiful thing about our evolutionary consciousness, is we speak more to the parents who are feeling this tug on their heart. And
Mm,
what we also recognize with our members who go through our space is that every experience that got them to this point of that pull on the heartstrings
yeah.
was very much on purpose. As
Mm,
we've already spoken about, sometimes experiencing that pain is so vital in understanding the contrast of what we're living through. So I always find with all of our members in my own journey, the depth sometimes of the pain that we experience also reflects the depth of the joy, because now we really understand what the counterbalance looks like. And it's so much easier then to hold our child with compassion and forgiveness when they're going through their upsets, when they're discovering who their true self is outside of you, when they're doing things that you may not be agreeable to. You just recognize that this is a part of the life process. And it also enhances all of our other relationships and partnerships and sisterhood and brotherhood, whatever else it may be. So at no point do I feel that anything that's landed us here was at all by accident. I think every part of that needed to happen for you to eventually had that tug on your heart to say, hey, there's more here waiting for you. And I find that the most powerful thing a child can witness is a parent who actually chooses themselves enough to step into their true calling, because the child also has a chance to witness that contrast. Because even when they're 3 and 4 and 5, they may not intellectually understand it, but they're seeing it, they're feeling it, they're hearing it. So tremendous gift for a child, as I saw with my own mother in my earliest years, as she was going down the personal development route and self-inquiry route. I really saw that transformation coming about, and it just allowed for so much more in my own life, in realizing I could do that for myself, and I could have so much more of a human relationship with my mom, because she wasn't attempting to be this, again, this very conscious parent who has it all together. She was the human self married or merged with her higher self. And it was such a beautiful, beautiful union of those two ends of the spectrum that she brought into one human.
So there's no time frame. Like when you feel the
No
more.
time frame. Absolutely not. I think at any point, we have parents in our space that are 50 plus, 60 plus, and they really want to come into this aliveness, this freedom, this purpose. And I think they're doing a great service, not only for themselves, but all of those around them. And sure, the children may not pick up or be ready for the work at that time. That might not be their divine timing to come into the work, and that's okay. Maybe it's not even meant to happen in this lifetime. But what I think alleviates our guilt is knowing that we are showing up at 100% of our 50% in any given relationship. Because we know that the moment we're overstepping that 50% boundary, that we are interfering with somebody else's personal process, even if they're a child. So I think this concept of loving with an open hand is, sure, it may feel a little bit conceptual, but when we put it into practice and can really show up to love ourselves by taking time out for ourselves, by really diving into the inner work, by calling in the support that we need, that's how we ultimately show up guilt-free. Because we know that when we're in the presence of those children today, we only need to live for that present moment. We know that we are doing everything we could possibly do.
Yeah, well said. Well said. So, when parents are, right now, parents are getting involved with the teaching, right? Because of all the changes between school and what's going to come, in the States. And here too, in Canada, we're going to start probably blended learning. Who knows, right? We don't know. It's all. So, they're going to struggle with their roles, right? Mom, dad, and then teacher roles, right? How can parents prepare for this? Prepare themselves.
Yeah, so going back to the work that we do here, we find really understanding your own inner landscape and your own value system is probably the most tremendous thing that we can do. Because as you've already alluded to, so often we're on this treadmill based on what we feel may be convenient, may be the norm, may be safe, may be familiar. So we keep ourselves sort of boxed in. And right now what's happening is a lot of the walls are coming down. So we have more freedom and choice, and that can feel really unsteady, because never before have we felt to have so much freedom, yet we yearn for it inside.
Yeah.
So what I find with my own personal journey and those members that we have in our spaces is that the more clear you are on what values you want to live by, the easier it is to make decisions for not only yourself, but help guide the decisions for those around you. When you're in that space and clear on yourself, then you're no longer putting your ways of being on others, your expectations, your emotional hunger on others. And what that also allows is for that child to sit in the discomfort of this, the void, the emptiness, and say, hey, mama, let's try this out. You know, if they are 10 or 12 or 15, let's
Mhm.
try this out. Maybe it would feel really good for me to try out nature school. Maybe it would feel really good for me to go to school 4 days a week and take a day off with you, or however we can make it work. Maybe it would be really good for me just to do virtual learning and step out and we have family time every evening. You know,
Mhm.
the child is so deeply intuitive. And this is what we miss a lot in our developed world, where so much is focused on productivity and pushing ahead and go, 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 is sitting back and really starting to assess for you as an individual, and then as an individual family unit, is what is the best framework for me and my children.
Mhm.
I fully understand and appreciate that there's a lot of parents who are working 9 to 5. You know, that is the obligation that they've stepped into in this lifetime. And that's okay. And I really feel for them, because in our household, I mean, I have mostly an online business right now. We've pulled away from a lot of our in-person
Mhm.
services with parents. And as a result, we're in the online space. So I can work after my kids are in bed. I can work on the weekends. I can give them to the care of their grandparents and work that way. So I know that I do have a bit of flexibility. I was called to leave everything a couple of years ago and just step into this. Now, for those who do have full schedules, I can
Mhm.
understand that it must be such an internal debate, because you know perhaps that you want to spend more time with yourself. You
Mhm.
know you want to spend more time with your children. So I'd say every day making sure that you are taking time with you and you alone, really sitting down and reflecting on what are my top core values? What are my top 3 values? And how are they connected to the values of our family unit?
Mhm.
And what would that mean for the schooling system? So
Mhm.
that we can gain that inner clarity, the less we are swayed by all of these external, the overwhelm and the cognitive dissonance, you know, where we're saying, I feel this in my heart. You've probably felt it before. I feel this in my heart, but I'm going to do this because
Mhm.
people are telling me to, because the framework's telling me to, because society's telling me to. And that's where parents are struggling most. So as much as I can give you tactical, you know, ways of going about this, like practice at home with your child sitting in the mask, make sure that you're really preparing your child for the school day, laying out their expectations, talking to them about social distance rules with their friends and teachers. You know, I can talk to you about this all day long. But similar to what we talk about in our space, the truth is that the foundational work carries you so much further, because the
Mhm.
rest of these decisions are just on the mind level.
Yep.
And all of that will come intuitively when we're connected with ourselves. You
Yep.
no longer need to navigate, you know,
Mhm.
decision to decision on an intellectual level when you're
Mhm.
clear in your heart. So we're
Mhm.
suddenly going from working from the mind, which can be confusing, overwhelming, distracting, muddled, and just puts us into sheer overwhelm, to going back to the heart and saying, am I really clear as to what type of life I want with my children? So
Mhm.
I think that's a lot of what we're experiencing now, is a
Yep.
parent is finally realizing that they have a say in the matter,
Yep.
and it's
And the
okay to be.
choice, there's a choice here
Yeah,
more than ever.
yeah,
And then it's sometimes it's scary, right?
it's really scary. So
Yeah.
the other piece of it is calling in the right support.
Yeah.
Those who have walked a path of being true to themselves, those who have explored different opportunities, those who, you know, really have a good sense as to what their child's needs are, those that you can have authentic conversations with, those that you can be in community with and really express the depths of your heart, your concerns, your challenges. And I
Mhm.
think there's, you know, out there, there's sort of a few different types of communities. There's those that, again, normalize the parenting struggle and kind of keep us in the whirlpool of emotional
Mhm.
dissonance, which can be really tricky because we never feel like there's a way out. And then there can be this sort of this conscious idealism, which I went into for many years as well, thinking, oh, I just have to be the perfect parent and I always have to be aware and I always have to be doing it right, you know?
Mhm.
And then I recognize that there's a really beautiful intersection of those two worlds, which is just being you, being the human version of yourself and all of your feelings and your emotions, and taking responsibility
Mhm.
enough to say, I need support here. I
Mhm.
need somebody who can help guide me through this, so that I can start breaking away from the constant guilt and shame and struggle
Yeah.
that I've been in for years.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Because a lot of
Exactly.
it doesn't have to do with the kids at the end of the day. Most of it's coming from our own relationship with our parents.
Yeah. Exactly. What kind of programs do you offer for parents? I know you've mentioned some.
Yeah, so the first experience that we invite people into, parents again who are feeling this imbalance and this, oh my
Mm-hmm.
gosh, I just don't know how to get through the rest of life. Do I have to wait until, how we sort of um, dream of this time of retirement? Well, with kids,
Yeah.
sometimes it's the moment the child's going to get out of the house, the moment they're 18 and they're self-sufficient, they go off to university or get a job, whatever it may be. Um, what I love is inviting parents into this 4-week experience that we call the balancing act. Because even through these 4 weeks, parents start to realize how much ownership they have to take for that which is outside of them, including their children, and how much ownership they're meant to take for what's going on within them. We
Mm-hmm.
start to really break the identity with the child because we recognize, like, I honor attachment theory. I mean, I think attachment parenting is beautiful and it's so important for us to create that safety net. And it's important that we recognize that that connection always starts with ourselves first. So the balancing act is really a first taste of that over 4 weeks, and it's very affordable. Everyone can come in. It's very accessible, done from the home space. You can do it on your own time. And we've seen people go through that and really open up to a new way of being. Now, to take that further, if you're feeling like you're really ready for something deeper, going into some of this emotional patterning that you've been carrying well before you had the kids, we
Mm-hmm.
have the Reconnection Project. So that's really a chance to reconnect, connect with your truest essence, that person that you were born to the planet as, that person that was alive, whole, um, uh, forgiving, accepting, on purpose, creative, all of these things that we see in children, that's also meant to be carried forward. And this is what we really help reconnect you to, while still taking into account your very human responsibilities.
Mm-hmm.
So that path involves a number of facilitators. We've brought it all into one space for individuals. We have a number of group sessions every month. There's also one-on-one healing and coaching throughout that. But that is really a life expanding journey. That's for people who are really ready for the true work and don't want to be going from course to course to course, thinking that, the next course will get me to a place where I feel this freedom, this joy, this aliveness, this expansiveness. It really gives you a chance to consistently be in accountability and have a safe space to visit each and every day as you're going through your ups and downs, because we know the journey is not linear and we need that constant feedback loop, right? When we go to the therapist, we meet with them once and then we may not see them again until our next session.
Yeah.
And then we wonder who's there to hold us in the meantime.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, we can rely on family or even our children sometimes, but the truth is they're going through their own process. So we need ongoing support, we've found, as we go deeper into our process. And it's absolutely tremendous. I mean, we have teachers in there, coaches in there, people who have grown kids and getting rid of chronic disease, their addiction, their illnesses, their anger, these things that have been so perpetual for them for 20, 30 years. Alleviating that and coming into full presence has just given them a completely new relationship with
Yeah.
themselves and an ability to connect with their children to a totally new extent. It's beautiful.
Mm-hmm. So your programs are only for parents. Is there?
So we do have non-parents in our space as well. I think the work, as you know, it applies to all of us. In our context, we typically reference the reparenting journey. So it really has to do with our relationship to our own parents and what we've carried through our lineage and what we are passing on to those around us. So whether it's the children that you see that you're readily impacting, or the partner, or the employees, I mean, you're welcome to come into the program. But what we do recognize is that with parents, each and every day having that mirror outside of them, such a pure source energy, such as children, they are the ones that are more readily and actively engaged in this type of work, simply because the pain is so present. Their
Mm-hmm.
patterns are so obvious when they're not shutting down their children and sort of attempting to dim their light or not have them speak their truth.
Hmm. Exactly. Yeah. So, what advice do you have for parents who are, at this moment, like a lot of us feel trapped? Whatever
Mm,
we're trying to decide, is it going back to work full time, half time, whatever, right? Part time, we don't know. And then school is another thing, right? So,
mm.
the time is kind of uncertain. So, what would you advise for them who are feeling like this?
Yeah, so my greatest advice to parents right now would be to use this time wisely. I know it's easy with less structure and maybe more time on our hands in some ways to pick up the phone, scroll through social media, stay up late and not get our full rest, want to complain about everything around us. My suggestion is to really start understanding what's going on for you as a human. So, first, I'd start with really journaling, sitting down and just for 10 minutes at nighttime, journaling about what you are grateful for. There must be moments in every single person's life who's hearing this on this call that you just had a spark of creativity or imagination, or the sun was shining down on your face, or you had a chance to connect with your child in a way that felt sort of meaningful and they just brought a smile to your face. We have at least one of those moments in a day, and I think most of us can probably agree to it. Or we got a message from that friend, just checking in on us. We had a
Mhm.
tea that we really enjoyed. So writing down that piece of gratitude and then putting down a couple lines of reflection as to how you're doing emotionally. What is your inner landscape really starting to feel like? Because naturally, what we tend to do as humans, especially when we're on this busy treadmill, is we shut down, shut down, shut down, especially our emotions. But our emotions are actually the barometer to our soul. They tell us how we're doing. And if we're not numbing, if we're not running away, if we're not constantly busy, this is the time to really connect with what's going on inside of us. So,
Mhm.
second to that, I would start assessing your values. And it may not be so clear right now, but what is it that you really prioritize in your life? Is it spaciousness? Is it peace? Is it freedom? Is it love? Is it expression of your artistic abilities? Is it connection with nature? Is it cooking? Is it, like nourishment, self nourishment, and by way of food? What are these core values for you? So if you can identify the top three values and take one action a day that's in alignment with one of those values, that's what I'd recommend doing for the next week, and just seeing how that even starts to shift your perspective. And then, secondary to that, it would really be calling in the support. Because as much as we think that we can navigate forward and figure it out, by jumping onto the internet and self diagnosing as we typically do, especially in the world of medicine or therapy,
Yep.
it would really be calling in the support that resonates with you.
Mm.
Finding people who have walked this path, finding people who really understand the language and your heart's essence, know where you've been, know how you feel, and can hold that space for you. It won't be your best friend, it won't be your sister, it won't be your parent during these times,
Yeah.
for the most part, because they're all navigating their own stuff. Find somebody who's trained in this type of work and have them help you see your truth, because
Mhm.
you need a clean mirror on the outside who's
Yeah.
willing to constantly reflect that back to you, that inspires you to, yes, love yourself, accept yourself where you are, and invite in the possibility of change, because
Mhm.
that's what we're being called to right now. And if you're dragging a lot of this old conditioning behind you with you, you're going to feel the heaviness. You're
Yeah.
going to feel the weight in your back. You're going to feel resistance at every turn. So it's
Mhm.
really important that we have somebody outside of us who can help us identify our shadow sides that we've tucked away, based on this emotional hunger. Nope, that part of me is not approved of. That part of me is unsafe to express. That part of me is not, doesn't have a place in the world. Those are the places that we're learning to re-meet. And from that, we come into this wholeness again. We come into
Mhm.
the sensation that, yeah, it's safe for me to be finally human again. And
Mhm.
we no longer have to fear all of these limiting beliefs that we've been pushing away all our lives, or
Mhm.
to steering away from. So
Yeah.
that would really be my recommendation, is spend time with you. Carve it out every day, every week in your schedule, even if it's 10 minutes. Be totally intentional and mindful during that time. Because I can promise you that most of us are, chalking up the social media hours. We're chalking up the time where we're overindulging, overeating, over speaking, and we're not listening enough. So
Mm.
now is really the time of rest and reflection. We've been given this with very, very rich and deep purpose, and it's the time for us to really show up for ourselves.
Yeah, yeah, and as you said, just stop feeling that it's a horrible time, right? I mean, there's no point to it if you
Yeah,
keep saying that because
it's
you're kind of
here,
it's
right?
here.
It's here, and it's real, and the emotions are very, very present. There's
Yeah,
no, but the more intimate, the more friendly we can get with the emotions that are there, the less we fear, the less we repel them. And as a result, the less we repel them in our children, the less we repel them in our partners, in our parents, in our in-laws, in our, whoever may be in our very intimate circles right now.
yeah,
So it just gives everyone the freedom to be once we are more accepting of where we're at in this moment.
yeah. I love what you said about earlier too about giving that permission, right? It's almost like you have
Mm.
to give yourself permission to take that time for you because as parents, that's the last thing we always think about to do. So it's
Yeah, we are very much over givers, and it can be very difficult when we're in this. And this is an old pattern again. This is something that's come through the lineage, and especially for women, we've overgiven, self sacrificed, given so many parts of ourselves away to fit in and belong and approve. And I'm not sharing to that we defy all the systems and say no and run away. I'm simply sharing that there's an opportunity here to really claim our own worth and say, I'm actually deserving in 24 hours of 15 minutes to myself, of an hour a day, of a half day away from my children, especially where there's two parents or an additional caregiver in the home. I ask that question, especially with one or maybe two children, if you can manage, why is it that you're not taking a half
Mhm.
day away for yourself to go and sit in nature and be by the ocean and just allow nature to hold you? Why
Mhm.
is it that you're not connecting to a sisterhood circle and just maybe sitting in the park and allowing yourself that? What is keeping you from that? And the message I want to share for anyone listening, especially mamas, is that you are worthy of that. You are deserving of that. And you allowing yourself to go there, to break out of these shackles that tell you that you always have to be tethered, that you're only a good mother if you're always hovering over your child. We need to break away from that cycle because the child is also becoming overly dependent on you. The
Mhm.
enmeshment, the codependency cycles are already happening. And that's what we need to start to break if we want that child to also be fairly resilient, fairly independent, fairly autonomous in their own adult relationships,
Mhm.
where they really have the sovereign right to be true to themselves and allow their partners to be true to themselves. And then eventually their kids to be true to
Mhm.
themselves. So it's really beginning here and now. And the question I ask is, how deserving do you feel of your own best life?
Mhm.
That's what the child is waiting to witness.
Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much for all your advice and sharing your journey with us today. And if they want more information, they could always I'm going to have all the information about you so they can contact you for the programs or advice on this. But yes, you have a holistic life now because of this journey you took on, right? Is that
Mm.
correct to say?
Yeah, it's the good and the bad. It's the ugly and the beautiful. It's all of that. And after a while, it simply appears to be all beautiful because as you so graciously brought up, every part of our journey has had a specific meaning to it. I see them just as a launching pad, these lily pads that we're jumping and leapfrogging from. They
Mm.
all have purpose. So I leave you with this is really just allowing yourself to honor whatever has been up until this point and recognizing that that's all brought you to this space. If you found yourself on this podcast and tuning in to this work, that it's brought you here and now to recognize that you have a chance to change your life and have it really reflect who you are meant to be on this planet if you so choose.
Yes, yes, so powerful. Thank you very much, Ashley. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.